Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but as always, we want to give a shout out to our sponsors. Now, don't hit that fast forward button so fast. These are all companies that I used as an athletic director. I really recommend that you use them too. So listen to our podcast shout outs, then listen to the interview. And when we're done, go visit these sponsors. You're going to be glad you did. Here we go. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Hometown Ticketing for their support of the podcast. Go to hometownticketing.com. They're the leading digital ticketing provider to schools, colleges, and athletic programs. I think that says it all, but go to hometownticketing.com anyway. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. Their products not only generate income for your athletic department, they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's sidelineinteractive.com. We also want to say thanks to our friends at Home Campus, the exclusive high school and state association management platform. It's also your one-stop for things like scheduling, student-athlete eligibility and clearance. Who doesn't do that every day? Communication with other ADs, with your state association, with your coaches, your parents, your kids, uploading rosters. If you're an athletic director, Home Campus is going to help you do your job better. It's that good. Go to homecampus.com to get started. We also want to say thanks to Snap Raise. If you've ever spent weeks and weeks on a fundraiser and then got little, if any, return, you need to stop and go to snapraise.com. Hands down, the best online fundraising platform out there. We used it at our school with tremendous success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. It works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, stop. Go to snapraise.com. You're going to be glad you did. We also want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Go to their website, vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's a great way to show off your school record boards for all the teams, for all the sports, or your school's Hall of Fame. That's vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. We want to say thanks to Gipper for their support. Go to Gipper.com. It's the official social media graphics solution for the podcast, and their team will help you to create world-class content that'll help you celebrate your athletes and promote your teams. Gipper's used and trusted by over 4,000 high school and college athletic programs. It's professional graphic design made easy. Go to Gipper.com. Let their team help you start creating world-class content. We also want to say thanks to our good friends at Huddle. Go to huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school. It's the trusted platform for team performance. Our coaches really enjoyed the tools that Huddle provided that let them coach our kids up to the highest level. Go to huddle.com. Join the 8 million users and turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to our friends at Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your parents, your student athletes, you're really missing out. Athletic directors already hear from the complainers, the people that want to gripe about everything, but that's only a small percentage. Athletic surveys will connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% that support your program. And that's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent, or maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Talk to their team. They're going to help you take your athletic program from good to great. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We're doing a back to college episode with somebody I like to call an old friend. Our guest is Joy Morgillo. She is currently an admissions rep at Western Connecticut State University. She and I met when she was in a previous life, and we're going to hear about that as a coach, and I was a track official. But we're excited to have her on the show today, talk a little bit about her journey and the things that she's doing right now. So, Julia, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Thank you, Jake, for having me.
Well, I know it's a very busy time for you. We appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us. Let's go ahead and jump right in. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that quick bio, where you were born, where you grew up. Maybe take us up through your own college years, and then we'll hear more about your career. But what's the Julia Joy Morgillo origin story?
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me on the podcast. My origin story in sport is very much parallels the sport I chose to pursue for life, which was running and track and field. I started in sport when I was really young. Both my parents were teachers in Connecticut. I'm originally from the New Haven area, grew up in North Haven, Connecticut. Played a lot of sports growing up, from swimming and gymnastics. Basketball mostly were my top three. And when I got to high school, I started running track and field and cross country. I ran in high school. My sophomore through senior year was state champion on my senior year on the 4x4 team, and went on to run collegiately at Stetson University. Shout out to the Hatters, who just qualified for the NCAA tournament berth in men's basketball yesterday. That was an exciting game to watch. I'm really pumped about that connection in for my alma mater there. But yeah, I ran collegiately all 4 years in college at Stetson on the cross country team. Stetson was in Florida, and I really was happy to make that move down there. It was a transition, and that's sort of what got me connected to Florida for a little bit of time. Stayed down there for a number of years for about a year after graduating, and worked for a youth organization that helped disadvantaged youth and youth who had been a part of the juvenile system get reacclimated to their communities, called Eckerd Youth Alternatives. And then I moved back to Connecticut in 2009, and I worked at Woodbridge Running Company. I still work at the Woodbridge Running Company part-time, but I worked there, and I also got a job at Wilbercross High School as a part of an organization called Gaining Early Awareness and Readiness for Undergraduate Programs. That got me in the college admissions role. That was my first role in college admissions. And then after that, transitioned to a role at another university for a period of time as an admissions rep. I was there for 5 years. That was Sacred Heart University, and then earned my master's while working in there. Lived up in Boston for 3 years before COVID had me on a tailspin back down to Florida. And that's where I met you. I was teaching and coaching at Springstead High School in Hernando County, Florida at the time. And I did that for 2 years. It was a lot of fun. It was a reconnection to my coaching days when I was at Wilbercross, because when I worked at Wilbercross, I also coached track and field and cross country there too. And so coaching's always been a passion, and reconnected me to the sport that I love so much. And I was really excited to get back into it down there. But I moved back up to Connecticut shortly before getting this role here at Western Connecticut State University. College admissions and the secondary education age has always been where I have enjoyed working with them. So it was great to take on this role too.
All right, we're going to jump back into those career things in our next segment. I want to go all the way back to, those formative years in Connecticut. Yeah, you said you mentioned you were involved in a lot of different sports, but track and field, cross country became your main one. I was a track guy, but I wasn't cross country. I was more of a sprinter and a hurdler. So I'm always curious, did the track and field coaches and the cross country coaches, did they find you because they said, wow, look at this athlete, she's running like crazy? Or did you find them because you love to run?
I found them because I love to run. I have an older sister who had ran cross country in high school as well too. She was a cross country basketball, softball athlete. And so both playing basketball growing up. My dad was a basketball, baseball player at Southern Connecticut State University, one of the other colleges in the Connecticut State University system. And he, like I said, was a teacher and coach growing up as well too. Very much had us in sport at a young age, and encouraged us to just try all different kinds of sports. I really had a passion for basketball. I think everyone kind of knew at that era too. I'm about the age that UConn women's basketball was becoming really popular. I went to a couple of those Slamma Jamma basketball camps, a couple of the UConn basketball camps in the summertime that were skills oriented growing up. But my sister was the one who said to me when I was about in middle school, you should just go out for cross country to keep in shape for basketball, get you strong for conditioning. And soon enough, I ended up enjoying that more than I did even basketball, just because I was pretty good at it. And so I kind of found running, and running found me in that way.
I love those lines. Just come out for cross country or track to stay in shape for your other sports. A great recruiting tool by those track and cross country coaches. I used it many times myself. Looking back on those years at Connecticut, or maybe even your years at Stetson as a Division One athlete, can you think of a moment? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but I guess I am. Can you think of a moment that at the time it didn't seem that significant, but now looking back from with perspective and wisdom, you can
Mm-hmm.
say, "Hey, that was a big moment for me."
Mm-hmm.
Anything come to mind?
When I was running in high school, we would go to a meet in the early spring at Trinity College. And that was the meet that got me thinking I want to run in college. I remember my first year, my coach put me in I was a distance runner mostly. So I did everything from the 800-meter, mile, and 2 mile a lot of times, but could drop down to do the 4x4 leg on the 4x4, or even in the sprint medley indoors too. But he put me in the mile at that Trinity Invitational, my first year doing track. That was my sophomore year, and that was just the meet where I was like, I want to do this at the next level, no matter what. I remember I got my butt kicked in that meet. I had a knack for going out fast when I was in high school, and not necessarily pacing myself, and went out really hard. But I learned a lot from that race, and just kind of kept on going from there.
Oh, very cool. I love to hear those origin stories of those inspiring stories. We're going to take our first break for our listeners. Our guest today is Joy Morgillo. She has got a tremendous background in athletics. She's currently an admissions rep at Western Connecticut State University. We're going to hear about that and more, but we're going to take that break, like I said. So please come back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Hometown Ticketing for their support of the podcast. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. Hometown's also the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges, but it's more than that. Go to hometownticketing.com. Their team is going to show you how to set up and sell tickets online, not just for your athletic events, but for things like school plays and concerts, school dances, even graduation. And here's the best part. Every school gets assigned a dedicated client success manager that's going to provide you hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com for more information. Hometown Ticketing. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We also want to say thanks to our friends at Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. You can schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their score boards in action. Their products not only generate income for your athletic department, but they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's that's sidelineinteractive.com. Check them out today. You're going to be glad you did. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest today is Joy Morgillo. currently admissions rep for Western Connecticut State University. Uh, Julia, you mentioned that you spent time in Florida. Obviously, that's where you and I first met. Uh, Take our listeners through that journey, as a high school teacher and a high school coach. And again, as an official and as a longtime athletic director and coach myself, I saw you that day at that track meet, and it's easy to see that you had the passion, the enthusiasm in our profession. So that's what first attracted me to you. So share with our listeners, how'd you end up at Springstead, and what do you remember about that experience?
Yeah, well, I ended up at Springstead High School through a turn of events. When COVID happened, I was working in college admissions in Boston area. But after the shutdowns and the university I'd been working at that time, you know, letting go a number of employees, including myself, I relocated down to Florida where my parents were to be with them and kind of wait out the COVID experience. And I ended up doing some substitute teaching and eventually met Dustin Kopchek, who had previously been on your podcast. He was my athletic director. I was hired by him in January of 2021 and given the opportunity to coach cross country indoor, or not indoor, but excuse me, cross country and outdoor track. I had previous experience working in New Haven public schools, as I said, at Wilbur Cross High School, and I coached cross country indoor and outdoors for 4 years there. And so he was excited to have somebody on board that was a head coach previously, had worked with, both boys and girls at that level. And I know high school, it's hard. Like you said, you sometimes have to do some recruiting, have to do some sweeping of the halls, as I used to say to him. And it was a lot of fun because it was very grassroots. He is a great athletic director in Hernando County. He really is, sensitive to the facilities that you need, to the equipment that you need. Anytime I had any concerns about things, I could go to him. So I was excited to be working with him. And I was teaching in the school at that point. There was an opening in the history department, and he had helped me get connected with the teachers that were hiring for that role and get certified at the time to teach. And it was a lot of fun.
Looking at your own experience as a high school athlete, pretty darn good one. And now, you're on the other end. You're the coach. You're trying to develop kids. And Springstead, pretty good program, but you're going to have your mix of novice kids who are brand new to the
Mhm.
sport, as well as elite kids that you're trying to get to the state meet. How did you balance that as a coach? Looking at serving everybody, but also trying to make sure each kid had their best experience.
Mhm. Well, running is one of those sports that not every kid loves at first. Some of them do just come out to keep in shape. And track and field, though, is the type of team that you can express to kids. You don't have to be good at one area. You could be good in multiple areas and try different events. And so I was working with Coach John Capel at the time, and he was working heavily with the sprinters. So I kind of let him take some of those kids who he knew were fast twitch muscle people. And he said to me, "You have a background in the distance events." And he knew I knew a couple other events and coaching and so forth. So we kind of split the team up a little bit and worked with identifying our young athletes' strengths and trying to put together some relays too here and there. But that's what you have to do sometimes. I mean, track and field is a great sport to do if you just want to test out your athletic abilities. You got the vert, and you can do high jump and triple jump. If you're got the long jump as well too, you can really stretch your legs out, do hurdles. If you do have those fast twitch muscles, 1 and 200 are a great way to go. And then if you're like me and you like to go to distance, you know how to pace yourself. 400 on up, come on in. And it's adapting the workouts daily. One thing that was an adjustment for me, even living down in Florida, was the heat. I remember some practices in February. It was like 85 degrees out, right? I'm like sweating. And I said to the kids, I'm like, I don't know how you guys do this. Heavy on the hydration breaks down there too. But we had so much fun. And that first year, really put together some good teams. Had a young 4x8 team that qualified for the regional meet. Had a 4x4 team that made it to the district meet, but just missed regionals. And then had one runner who made it to the state meet in the 800, and the women in the, yeah, we did have, I forgot, the women's 4x4 team made it to the state meet as well too, with Coach Capel. So he was happy to take them up there. Mhm.
Oh no, absolutely. And one of the great things about, track coaching and swimming too is, with regards to playing time, it's pretty easy to figure out, who's going to go in there because the stopwatch and the tape measure, they don't lie. So, there's a good reason for that. Now, in addition to all the things that you've done, you've had a long run, which I think is still going on, no pun intended, with Woodbridge Running Company. What's that all about? Share with our listeners how that's been a big part of your life.
Yeah, so the Woodbridge Running Company was the store I shopped at growing up. It's a Connecticut's longest independently owned running store. It's been open for 25 years, and I've been working there for going on 15 years. It is owned by Chris Dickerson. He was a former high school track coach and cross country coach at Amity High School in Connecticut, and then he also was an assistant coach at the Division I level at Quinnipiac University for a number of years too. He recently just retired from that, and I've been working for him since 2009. And he had at one other time, he had two other stores that he's since sold. So he's just got the one business now, but he is one of those coaching mentors. He was, when I was still running competitively for USATF and doing some marathons and half marathons in my 20s, he was coaching me too. And he's just one of those guys I can go to. He always is going to give me a direct, honest opinion, but he's also, one of those people who I feel like is a great mentor. I know you ask that a lot of your guests, who are your mentors. He's probably one of the best mentors I've had in business, in athletics, and in all aspects of life. He's been a great mentor to me.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead. We always do our toolbox at the end, but you said that he coached you. What's something that you have taken from his toolbox that he used with you that you now use with runners that you coach? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I would say Chris is the type of person, he's known me for years, and he's worked with a lot of athletes for years. Some of the athletes that he coached at Amity went on to run with for him at Quinnipiac, and so he got to coach them at both levels when he was coaching at Quinnipiac as well too. But I think you got to be willing to test out different methods. Sometimes as you grow as an athlete, what might have worked in high school doesn't necessarily always work in college. Time management piece is a big thing that he emphasizes, and so I think that goes along with testing out different methods. Sometimes it's like the workouts that you did your first few years running, sometimes they don't always work when you get to a higher level. The intensities might change, the level of the level of intervals or number of intervals that you're doing might change. And what also might change is just how frequently you're working out too. We adjusted that a lot because running is one of those sports that you can't go hard every day. You have to have a set schedule and a plan, and you sometimes map out the plan 2-3 weeks in advance. You see how the athletes are developing. He was a type of coach that when I was running for him, he would email me a month of workouts, and if they didn't work, if something came up in my work schedule or personal life, we could adjust them, move days around. But he was also the type of person that says you have to test out new methods and be flexible.
Yeah, what it brings to mind a conversation I had. This was years and years ago. I was at a junior college. I was actually the head cross country coach and the head track coach. And I had a local coach say, well, distance running, it's volume and intensity. That's all it is. I think you're missing a few pieces of the equation there.
Mhm.
There's motivation and all these other things that you work with kids. So yeah, it's balancing all of those factors with each kid within the team over the course of the season and at the college level over the course of the entire year. So yeah, it's not just volume and
Yeah.
intensity.
And a funny story, if you don't mind me sharing too, is
Sure.
in Connecticut, when I was running for USATF, this was back in 2015 and 16, there was a series of races that we used to do. And a lot of people know USATF will, pick a races in states like 5Ks and 10Ks, the longer distances. But one of my favorite races that they picked two times in a row was called the Spring Street Mile. It was a downhill mile in Manchester. And the mile had been my favorite event in high school. And so I was happy to get back into it. This is now like when I was 25 and 26, and Chris was really excited to coach me for it. But he said to me, he's like, we got to correct some of those methods that you had of going right to the front when you were in high school, because he remembered that. He didn't coach me in high school, but he remembered that was something I was known to do. Was the gun would go off, and the race horses would be firing, and all the cylinders would start going, and I would just kind of get right to the front and right on the rail. And he said, this is going to be a little bit different type of a race because it's downhill, so you got to pace yourself differently. And so we did a lot of workouts, not just high volume and high intensity stuff, but where we worked on hill repeats, and also to just understanding leg turnover. And so that's even knowing your sport specific drills and skills that you have to move. A lot of people think running is just one foot in front of the other. But there is so much to it, more to it than that. I learned that early in my coaching career, working at Wilbercross High School with Anthony Berteram and Esteban Rivera, and then Coach Capel also, working with him. He would do a whole day where we just did starts and blocks, and he would really drill those skills into the sprinters, about coming out of the block strong and with certain form. And so that's important to develop that early on.
Oh no, absolutely. We could do a whole podcast on, running technique and, heel recovery and everything. So
Yeah.
great stuff. Great stuff. We're going to do this at the end, but I want to go ahead and do it now. If one of our listeners wanted to reach out, pick your brain a little bit more, or just add you to their network, what's the best way that they can do that?
Sure. So I am on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is just my full name, Julia Joy Morgillo, Morgillo. That's the best way to connect with me. You can send me a direct message there. I'm of the generation where I am on Instagram as well too. It's a private profile, but you can certainly send me a message or so forth. But it's just Julia underscore Joy is my middle name, so I went with Julia underscore Joys of Running. Is my Instagram profile too. So those are the two forms of social media that I mostly use, and
All
people
right.
can connect with me there.
Well, our guest is Julia Joy Morgillo. We're going to take another break, but we are going to come back with some more. We're going to hear about Western Connecticut State University and all the great things you're doing. But let's take that break. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank Home Campus for their support of the podcast. Home Campus is the official state association and high school management platform for us. And it's a platform that you're going to use every single day. Things like scheduling, student athlete eligibility and clearance. Who doesn't do that every day? Communication with your coaches, your student athletes, your parents, the ADs around your state. You name it, Home Campus does it, and they do it better. To get started, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. That's homecampus.com. We also want to say thanks to Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraising platform and then got little, if any, return on your investment? Stop right here. Go to snapraise.com. Hands down, the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school, tremendous success. Our parents loved it, our coaches loved it. It works. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their other platforms, but if you're looking for a fundraiser, stop. You found it. Go to snapraise.com. Find out how they can help you support your program better. Snapraise.com. We also want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Go to their website, Vital Signs Wall of Fame, and check out their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's a great way to showcase your school record boards, your school's Hall of Fame, or simply share your school's most compelling stories and your diverse history. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention the podcast and you'll get a nice discount. Vitalsignswalloffame.com. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. We've been visiting so far with Joy Morgillo. Got a tremendous background in athletics as an athlete, as a coach, and now she is an admissions rep at Western Connecticut State University. Julia, share a little bit. How did you end up at Western Connecticut State, and what are some of the things you're doing right now?
Yeah, so my experience in education has always been at the secondary and post-secondary education levels. As I said, I started as a college advisor for Gear Up, and then eventually moved into an admissions role in 2012 and was at one university for 5 years. Lived up in Boston, where there's a lot of different schools up there. Worked in financial aid for 2 years, and then with graduate students for a year. And Western Connecticut State is, my hometown state area. It is located in Danbury, Connecticut. I knew a number of the admissions representatives that I work alongside of right now. Previously, when I had worked at Sacred Heart University, and I saw an opportunity become available at this school just at the end of 2023, and started with them in beginning of 2024. I'm a admissions recruiter for undergraduate programs, so students in those first-time students, but I also work with some international students as well too, coming out of high school. Having been a college athlete myself, I do work with athletes on our men's and women's lacrosse team, as well as the cross-country teams at Western. Western's D3, Connecticut is D3. And they compete in the Little East Conference. And so it's fun to get to work with some of the coaches with recruiting athletes. It's fun to be back in college admissions. I love being on a college campus. That's one thing I do like. It's always something going on. That hustle and bustle in between classes and our student workers in and out of the office is something that always, kept my energy high.
You know, obviously there's a lot of colleges out there, particularly in your area, and students, parents, they have a lot of choices. Go ahead and give our listeners that recruiting pitch. Why should they consider Western Connecticut State University?
So Western is a school that has a big school feel, but with a small approach to the classroom, meaning personal attention and wraparound services for students. I think one thing that Western really tries to do is embody the mind, body, spirit. It's got a great school spirit for the campus, really well known for visual and performing arts and musical theater at the school as well too, but also has a phenomenal AACSB accredited business school. And so there's a lot of areas of which students can get involved in the classroom and really start to find what they're passionate about and thriving in. But also too, what's nice about Western, as I said, is it has the big school spirit, but small feel. A 12-to-1 student to professor ratio or student to staff ratio. And the big thing that I always say to students is, a factor nowadays, affordability. It being a state university, it is a lot more affordable, I think, sometimes to go there for 4 years, and you get a great education. And for students who are in a tri-state region of Western, so if you're in New York or New Jersey, they do offer scholarship programs to make it just as affordable as the Connecticut region. And it's one of those schools that I think is a hidden gem in the Northeast. It's got a lot to offer its students, and I think that the wraparound services really help them to excel postgraduate wise.
Let's go ahead and talk a little bit athletics. I know the Western State Connecticut teams are the Wolves. So what can you tell our listeners about the Wolves athletic program?
Yeah, well, they've got 18 across men's and women's teams on campus, from basketball to football on the men's side. Those are two big sports. They do play in the Little East Conference, as I said. And then on the women's side, the bigger sports are volleyball, women's basketball, and then women's lacrosse as well, too. Our men's lacrosse team has been Little East champions previously in I believe 2016, 2017 before I got there, but they have a really competitive team as well too. And then, yeah, it's a great school to, kind of, if you want to play sports still in college, but learn how to balance, school and athletics. I think D3 is a great option for that. Sometimes people think that, you have to play at a D1 level in order to get that experience, but, then they get there and they find out the time management piece is hard. And, for me, that was a big adjustment when I was in college was time management. As a cross country athlete in Florida, we were getting up for 6:30 a.m. practice, starting running. So I was up most mornings by 5:45, 6 at the gymnasium by 6:30, by 6:15. And we were out on a, 4 to 6 mile run on almost a daily basis, every day, 6 days a week when I was in college. And that's a huge adjustment for people. But if you're doing D3, sometimes it's not as stressful. You're not traveling as far as you are if you're running Division 1, or you're playing Division 1 in a Power 5 conference. You get to be a little bit closer to home, and so family can definitely come visit you and see your games and so forth.
And you bring up a really good point. I just saw this, maybe it was yesterday, but it's true. About 7% of, all high school student athletes are going to compete at any level, collegiately, and only really 2%, sometimes less than 2% will be at the Division 1. So, most of us are not supposed to be at the Division 1 level. So if you love your sport, whether it's track or soccer, lacrosse, whatever it is, why not continue to do that at a great school, get a great education, and oh, by the way, you can continue being an athlete in something you love. Um, I know you've only been at Western State for a short period of time, but any success stories that you can share with our listeners about bringing in that student, even maybe not a student athlete, and seeing them grow and thrive at Western Connecticut State?
Yeah, well, actually, I know a couple of alumni from the school from when I worked previously at my other institution, and they were applying to programs at Western Connecticut and also the other school I worked at before, Sacred Heart University, and they ended up choosing Western Connecticut. So even before I got to where I am on this side of reading the applications and selecting the students and awarding scholarships, I knew this was a really good school because of the programs. A young girl who I knew when I was in high school, who I babysat, was deciding between Sacred Heart and Western Connecticut. This was back in 2015, and she chose Western Connecticut for its nursing program. And so I think that sometimes goes back to the point you also just made. When you're thinking about what you're going to do post high school, yes, you want to continue on with what you're passionate about. If that's sport, always try to make time for it. That's one thing I say, because it's something for fun in your life, and you're never going to want to let go of that. And it does help give you a sense of purpose and identity. But certainly too, think about how you can apply it to a career. Western Connecticut has some really great programs in health promotion, healthcare administration. They have a physical education degree too, if you're going to go into education. And then they also have a really good nursing program. And so I've seen a lot of students who take what they like to do outside the classroom, visual and performing arts, and make it their career through their major that way too.
Well, in our previous segment, we gave out your contact information on LinkedIn. If somebody's interested in Western State, Western Connecticut State, I keep saying Western State, Western Connecticut State University, how do they find out more information?
Yeah, so they can go online. WCSU is how we shorten it. Sometimes if it's a mouthful to say Western Connecticut State or WestCon, but WCSU and Western Connecticut State, you can Google that and it'll take you right to our main page. You could email admissions@wcsu.edu, or you could email me directly, Morgillo. It's my last name, Morgilloj @wcsu.edu.
All right. Julia Joy Morgillo at Western Connecticut State University. We're going to take a break, but we are coming back with some more. So please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to take a moment and say thanks to our good friends at Gipper for their support. Gipper is the official social media graphics solution for the podcast. And if you go to Gipper.com, their team is going to show you how to create world-class marketing content to help celebrate your athletes and promote your teams. Gipper's used and trusted by over 4,000 high school and college athletic programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made easy. How easy? Well, it's so easy, even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com, mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. That's Gipper.com. We also want to say thanks to our friends at Huddle. Go to Huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that allowed them to coach our kids up to their highest level. Go to Huddle.com, join the 8 million users, and turn your school into a Huddle school. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Julia, one of the things we try to do with the podcast is this idea of sharing best practices. So I'm going to put you on the spot again. What are some things that maybe you've seen in your travels in athletics, or maybe things that you do in your day-to-day as a leader in athletics that you would consider best practices? What can you share with our listeners?
Well, one thing that I remember a manager doing with me early in my admissions career is he was a golf coach at one point. So I think, was used to being on his feet. And so he used to do what they called standing meetings. And it was kind of like consulting with a caddy at the time. He'd call you in and he'd say 3 things you're working on, 3 things that you want to accomplish. I guess, you can list them as 3 things you've, already accomplished. And 1 to 2 things that you feel you need from him in order to get those 3 things accomplished. So kind of taking some feedback and giving you feedback at the same time. He was someone who he always had a little time on his hands because he was running from place to place on campus. When I worked at the other institution with him, he was in athletic recruitment. He worked a lot with compliance for Division I schools. So I think he was always on his feet, because he had once been a golf coach and now he was in admissions in a liaison role. And so he really liked to do what he called standing meetings. And I think that's a best practice that a lot of people, especially if you're in athletics, it incorporates that, high energy feel that, you get from coaches. You think about it, it's like huddling up, basically. We didn't call it that, but he just called it a standing meeting, but it's just kind of a huddle. And, in a basketball huddle or a football huddle, you only have so much time to, hit 3 things that you want to hit with your players. So you tell them right away what they maybe need to work on, what you see that they're doing good. And then, you tell them, what do you need from me? Sometimes a coach might not be able to give it to you right away on the sideline, but as a manager, certainly there's always something that they can be doing for you to help you get to that next step. So, take that standing meeting and kind of that huddle approach and apply it to, your everyday life in athletics.
That I've never heard that particular best practice, but I like it. I had a boss that would say, "Hey, let's talk and walk." He was always on his way somewhere, but he's going to try to maximize that time outside of his office in the hallway. So I adopted that too. I'd still try to stop a little bit. Okay. Looking ahead, okay, now you've had a varied career, and do you see the Western Connecticut State position? Is that expanding for you? Do you see a director of admissions in your future? Do you see yourself dabbling back in coaching, maybe getting involved with the track program? We ask our young people this: where do you see yourself in 5 years? So, where do you see this journey taking you next?
Well, I do see the university growing a lot at this time. It is at a pivotal point in its time where student enrollment is definitely on the climb after COVID. I know some colleges have felt that, when we went virtual during COVID, it was kind of hard to get some of the students back on campus, but they've seen a resurgence of students wanting to live on campus again, get involved more on campus. So, I'm working not only, like I said, with undergraduate students, but international students, possibly, having more students from across the globe attend Western is something that, could happen in the near future. They've already got about spread out in our undergraduate program around 24 international students, and then another 12 another dozen in our graduate programs. And I think we're looking to grow that to hopefully be between 30 and 50 international students in undergraduate fields as well too. I know they're expanding some of the fields of business with entrepreneurship, and I had previously worked at another school that specialized in entrepreneurship. So they're excited to add that specialty to their school, their Ansel School of Business. And I'm happy to work with a lot of those students. I'd always welcome another opportunity to get back into coaching, always. And, I did it at the high school level in Connecticut for 4 years at Wilbur-Cross High School. I was so excited when I was teaching that I came across a position at Springstead and got to work with Coach John Capel and then Tyson Graham and Kara Mance. And those years are some of the most fun I had. I've always said, when I retire, I might still just go back to coaching, because being in a white hat with a clipboard and a stopwatch is just where I feel at home. It just really is.
All right, very cool. Well, I hope that happens for you. Obviously, you're doing some great things there at Western Connecticut State. Well, Julia, this has been great, kind of reconnecting from when we first met a while back, but we're not done yet. We always wrap up with the athletic director's toolbox. Now, you're not an athletic director, but you certainly know your way around the world of athletics. So, we're going to take our final break, hear from Athletic Surveys, who sponsor this segment. When we come back, going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director, maybe a brand new coach, on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 things in the toolbox. So let's take that break. And when we come back, we're going to find out what Julia Joy Morgillo is going to put in her new athletic director toolbox. Please stay with us. We want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack for sponsoring the toolbox segment of the podcast. Athletic Surveys is about connections. They're going to connect you to your stakeholders. Now, athletic directors already hear back from the complainers, the people that want to gripe about everything. Athletic Surveys will connect you to them, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% of your parents, your coaches, your student athletes that support your program. And that's tremendously valuable information to have when you're talking with that frustrated parent, or maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We have been visiting today with Julia Joy Morgillo. Tremendous athletic background. Now she's an admissions representative for Western Connecticut State University. Julia, we've already established you're not an AD, but I think you know your way around the world of athletics. So, what 3 tools are going to go into your new athletic director, or we could say new coach, toolbox? What do you got?
Well, I've worked with a lot of athletic directors who they take notes, but they take notes in their own way. So I think have a clipboard ready, or your iPhone or whatever type of phone you have always charged, and your notes pad open, and be willing to take suggestions and notes in your first year, or in that very beginning. Try and come up with some policies and procedures that are going to carry on consistently throughout your career. And you learn a lot your first year. The trials and tribulations of an athletic director or coach in their first year, of what to do and what not to do, definitely are telling of how your career could turn out. But take notes and just try to write down everything that works for you, and be open. As I said when we talked about the coach that I've worked with, and owner of a running store, Chris Dickerson, has done, be open to new methods. Write down what's working, and write down what's also not working, so you know how to test it and change it next time.
Absolutely. Adding that collection of information. What else would you suggest go into that toolbox?
Well, one thing that I try to do as an observer and as a questioner type personality is listen first and sometimes respond second. When I was growing up, as I said, in athletics, I was a quick responder. I remember I was always aggressive on the basketball court, jumping on every loose ball, and in track and field, trying to get to the front of the pack really quick. But in my age, I've learned, and I know make myself sound older than I am by saying it that way, but in my maturity, I guess you could say, I've learned it's important to listen and really take in that feedback. Listen to your coaches as to what they need from you. If you're an athletic director, like I said, in those standing meetings, really kind of open your mind and your ears to what they're sometimes griping about. It's an insight into how things need to get fixed, and maybe what mistakes or things you're missing as a manager or as a director of them, and how you can sometimes do a better job yourself. Be open to that critical feedback. It was called constructive criticism by my father growing up, but it's sometimes not even criticism. It's just pointing out, like, hey, you're already good at what you do, but if you helped me in this way, you might be even better.
Yeah, our regular listeners have heard me say many times that listening, uh, at the end of my career, I knew and I understood how valuable it was. I wish I would have learned that earlier in
Mhm.
my career and used that tool much more frequently. All right, you gave us two great ones. What's number three?
Number three is always keep sports fun. I mean, that's the number one reason why I went into athletics in general, or just started playing sports. Was it was fun. I like to be outside. I like to do things where I'm moving a lot, and I have a lot of energy, and so I think at a young age, my parents were told, "Hey, just put her in sports and she'll be fine." I get it from my parents, though. I mean, as I mentioned, my dad was a two-sport athlete at Southern Connecticut State University, Division II level. He played a little bit of minor league baseball. And my mother, she was actually before the era of Title IX, because she graduated in college in the 70s, so she didn't get to compete in swimming, but she was a swimmer, and she still swims in her retirement from teaching and working as a flight attendant, something that she did her two careers. She still swims a mile a day in Florida. And so, keep sports fun, keep moving. Movement does, help you not just stay fit and stay active, but also it kind of heals a lot of your soul in some ways. I do an embodiment program, a mind body therapy program here in Connecticut called Move to Heal, usually 1 to 2 times a week, where we get together and we do a strength training class. It's sort of a different workout each week, designed by someone who I knew actually in high school. She had been a competitive swimmer, and she now came up with this nonprofit organization that hosts group therapy and uh, workout sessions called Move to Heal in Connecticut. And I started going to them in 2022, and I've been going consistently, almost 1 to 2 times a week since October of 2022.
You probably see me writing that down. Great stuff. And going back to your point about fun, what other job do we have that people can do where you're working with kids and coaches and you're going to games and things like that? So yeah, absolutely. As an AD, as a coach, even as a admissions rep, you got to
Yeah.
have fun. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
as I
Joe,
said, I mean, like, for me, this coaching especially, this is something I've always been passionate about, because I had that cheerleader type personality. I think there's those coaches sometimes that are, the authoritarian people. They're there with the whistle, and sometimes they definitely have the organizational skill differently than I do. I was someone who I was very well organized, but I definitely was the cheerleader on the
mhm.
sidelines. That day that you met me, I was I was running from one place to the next, helping athletes get set up at the high jump pit and so forth, and just ready to cheer them on, because that was a big meet. That was the regional meet, I remember. And that's one thing I just enjoyed, is just, I always said, I'm going to root for you. I'm going to root for you no matter what place you're coming in. Even if you're coming in, at the end of the pack, I'm still going to be screaming your name.
No, you're absolutely right. I saw you. I knew right away. That's somebody I want to get on the podcast. Okay. Well, Julia, thanks again for taking some time out of your busy schedule to share with us one more time. If one of our listeners wanted to reach out and add you to their network, and listeners, I think you got a great resource here. What's the best way they can get a hold of you?
Sure. So my LinkedIn profile is just my full name, Julia Joy Morgillo, Morgillo. And my email at Western Connecticut State University is my last name, Morgillo, J at wcsu.edu.
All right. Well, Julia Joy Morgillo, thanks again for sharing. All the best moving forward. And we're going to have to get you back on the podcast down the road, see how it's going.
Awesome. Love that. Thanks so much, Jake.
For our listeners, we appreciate you tuning in. And just a reminder, we upload the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every day, either an interview or a new segment. So we hope you're going to come back for the next segment on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time.